Okay, let's try to do this video again. Sweets actually interrupted last time. It's morning time, so still getting coffee in and that type of thing. The snow stopped finally, but it started to get a little bit nasty out. The girls wore their snow boots because it was getting kind of thick when they were leaving, but it stopped. It's basically melting. But this is an Ask Her Snowy question that is fitting for today. I had someone ask me this question, maybe, let me see the date. It was about 2 weeks ago. And at the time, the weather here was just raining and kind of warm. And in fact, I was going to mow the grass. It's kind of like spring, kind of, because it was in the 50s and I've even got blooms. Some of our flowers have bloomed. The tree back here is blooming. There's blossoms on some of the trees, or trying to, because the weather got kind of warm. It's been raining quite a bit. But this person asked a question, and she says that she is originally from Thailand, and her husband's black, so they're in a Malaysian relationship. They live in Texas, the only state that she's lived in. They're going to be moving here to the area. She does make reference to Tacoma a lot, so I assume it's Tacoma, not necessarily Seattle or some other place, but weather here is the same pretty much. And her question is not so much about the rain, more or less about snow. She's never dealt with it. How bad does it get? From what she has seen, it doesn't get that bad, but she wanted to know my perspective. Well, let me say that here you would think, because we're so far north, that we would get a lot of rain. Or not a lot of rain, a lot of snow, but we don't. Um, Washington is a very unique state. And I've gotten this question before about weather. It's a very unique state because even though it's called the Evergreen State, the western part of the state is completely different than the eastern part. Some people will tell you that the weather patterns are going to be drastically different once you go over to the eastern part. So the eastern part is like high desert, right? The western part, due to the mountains, the weather patterns change things drastically. So just 3 weeks ago, I think, when it was snowing, Seattle had gotten a lot of snow up in Everett. So the farther north you went, it was really bad. They had gotten snow and school was canceled. Down here, we got a little bit of something, but it was over with and done. There was no problems, right? Today, it snowed down here in Tacoma, but rained up in Seattle and even downtown Tacoma, because I'm only 3 miles away. Downtown Tacoma, where Noel was, got a little bit of snow, but here we got basically about a little more than half an inch. Not a full inch, but maybe, depending upon where you were, right? It's still on the ground, but it's starting to melt because the temperature's starting to rise. So that gives you an idea, right? There's snow on the ground right now, but it's starting to melt, and the snow started falling at what, 8 something, and it covered stuff pretty quickly, but it's already starting to melt off. So that's kind of the situation. It's not like back in Indiana where it would snow, and once it starts snowing, it's going to be bad, usually. And I would really start to panic. I remember, because I had a long drive home when I lived there, basically it would start snowing, and I would look to see how many hours I had left to work because I knew it was going to be disastrous trying to get home. And so it would just be bad, right? Here is not like that. In Indiana also, sometimes you would have ice and then the snow, and that was just the worst, right? Here you don't really go through that. It doesn't really get below freezing here, ever, hardly. If it does, it's for like a day or less. Just like it doesn't get 100-degree temperatures here very often. It's extremely rare. If it is, it's just like a day or so. There may be 2 days back to back, but that's very rare. It does get pretty warm here in the summer months, right? But generally, what you're going to see in terms of weather is a lot of rain, and that starts around October or so. You'll notice that as here, because we're so far north, you'll notice that you have days that are super long. It'll be 9 o'clock at night and it's still daylight out, right? When that starts to shift and change, you know that weather is going to start to shift and change in terms of like rain, right? When that starts to change and you start seeing that it gets darker a lot sooner, and the skies are getting gray, it typically is gray all day or most of the day, right? Or cloudy. Here we have gray and cloudy. Because I mean, there is a difference. Right now it's cloudy, so I can still kind of see out, and it looks perfectly fine. Gray is just, it's gray, right? And that is what people have a hard time dealing with. It's not so much the cloudy, it's the gray and the drizzle. So October, November, December, as you get closer towards those months, it gets more and more gray, and you start to have more and more rain. Now, the rain is not typically this downpour, right? It's typically this kind of misty type of rain. It may pick up every now and again. It may have periods of on and off rain. It may rain all day, but it is not like big, huge dumps of rain, right? Again, referencing when I lived in Kentucky and Indiana, you would see large volumes of rain that would just come down. Here, it doesn't do that. But that prolonged period of drizzle, it adds up. So then your yard just gets flooded. And I even left a post not long ago that I'm basically got a little pool outside of the house because it's just the constant rain over a long period of time. The ground gets so saturated that it just can't handle it. So everything is just flooded. So you do have that, right? You do have that. I mean, it's insane. But typically, when you start seeing the February, is when you typically see snow here. Typically, I've noticed. And it's not ironic that today is what, the second? What's today? The third. So I mean, there's snow, but probably the snow will end, as far as the period of when we're going to get snow, probably within another week or so, because then we have like a very short spring, and then it gets kind of into summer. Some people would argue that no, we have more of a longer spring and a very tiny summer, whatever, but it starts to change, and then you notice that the weather's getting a lot better. Now, what that means is you're still not going to have sunny days. Weather getting better means there's less periods of rain, right? You can literally go outside and do some stuff, and you're not rained out, right? The yard is not so saturated that you can literally walk out there and not fall down, because literally it's like mud almost. I mean, there's grass, but you can't walk without falling. So that typically starts to end around the March time frame, right? So it starts to clear up, then you can go out there and have a garden and all of that stuff. So middle of March, things start to get a lot better. And then, when you get into April, then things are pretty cool, typically. But that's kind of the period. So snow, if that's your concern, is not that bad here. That's not to say it won't snow, but generally, if you're concerned, and to say that, yeah, there's reports that talk about how little it snows. It really doesn't snow here. That's not to say you won't experience like a foot or so. Last year or the year before, we had gotten like over a foot of snow. That does happen. But the chances of that happening all the time is just very low. It's not like that. There's no real distinct winter because we have these ebbs and flows. You know what I mean? Just like I said, the other day it was in the 50s and fairly warm. And then it snowed just today. So that kind of gives you this up and down that people are dealing with. And that's the same thing with the rain. It's this up and down. So one of the things that bothers people obviously is the rain, and how to cope with that is just going to depend on you, right? It's going to depend on the person. That typically is a problem for a lot of people, and they end up moving because they can't handle the gray skies all the time. And a lot of people here have adapted to finding indoor activities during that time, right? So a lot of the museums get booked. People are less likely to go to the zoo, they're less likely to go to the parks and things like that, the beach, because it's just gross out. So you will find that a lot of the museums, a lot of the restaurants, a lot of like our studio, it gets busy during this time because there's nothing to do really outside. Then as soon as the sun stays out longer than an hour, the beaches are jam-packed because it still may be kind of breezy and kind of chilly, but people are out there. It should stop. I think it's delivery. So typically whenever it starts to get a little bit better and the sun is out for longer than an hour, you'll see people just flock to the beach because they are so thirsty for a little bit better weather and being able to be outside. So that's kind of, people look forward to that. That's kind of what you can expect. But yeah, weather wouldn't keep me away from here. Would I like for it to be a little bit more sunnier? Sure. But I know where we are and kind of how the weather patterns are. It doesn't bother me. Hopefully it doesn't bother you. Good luck on your move here. If you have any other questions, be sure to ask me. Hopefully you will like this video. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.